Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the Constitution Democratic Services Committee, 15th of September 2000. Sorry, I got that wrong, didn't I? Start again. Welcome to the Constitution Democratic Services Committee, Wednesday, the 5th of November 2025 at 2 p.m. So going on to the agenda, the first item are apologies.
Yes. Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Hiram McGill and Councillor Arnold Woolley. And then we have a number of substitutions. So Councillor Jeff Collett is substituting for Councillor Gina Madison. Councillor Roy Wakelam is substituting for Councillor Rob Davis, and Councillor Sean Bibby for Councillor Michelle Perfect.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest, including whipping declarations. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, Chair. Item 10, I'd like to declare a personal interest.
Thank you. Any other declarations?
Chair, I think for that item, we tend to record that as a matter of course because all members would have that same interest. So it's the standard thing that we do every time this report comes to this committee and council. We will record that accordingly. So all members don't need to declare that here. No.
So that's a blanket.
Basically, yes.
Declaration of interest. Thank you. Item 3, the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 15th of September 2025. I'm reading the right page now. So if we go through it page by page, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Do we have any comments? Can I have somebody to propose agreement? Thank you, Councillor Coppell. Seconder, Councillor Marshall. All those in favour, kindly raise. Thank you. That's bad. Right. Item 4, the forward work plan and action tracking. To agree the terms of business to be discussed at future meetings and to inform the committee of progress against actions from previous meetings. You'll find all of these on pages 7 to 16. Do we have any comments?
Do you want me to just quickly explain the
certainly.
forward programme? So,
Councillor Ibbotson.
Yeah, if I just before I'm happy to quickly whiz through it, Chair. This is the standard monthly, or every time the committee meets, just a record of the full work programme for members to review and contribute to any suggestions. Members will note that a later item on the agenda does have some additional items to schedule, which once that item's been dealt with, we can put those through the work programme. It's just to ensure that members are aware that January is going to be a busy month anyway, but there's quite a lot to go through there. And likewise in March. The actions that are open, there are several still open, and they will be dealt with in the very near future. The online e-learning software has been updated recently, so it has caused some issues logging on. So it was pretty straightforward last time. It's slightly more complicated this time. The first time you do it, after that, it's fine. So what I'm going to do or propose to do, rather than just send a blanket email to all members with the link and confuse everyone, I'm happy to hold a like a drop-in session for members to inform them how to do it and do a demo like I did at the committee. It's slightly different to the last time. It's just a little bit of a fiddly steps at the start, but once you're in and that's been done, it works pretty well afterwards. There are a few other, or there's 3 items open from the IFEW feedback which haven't been responded to, so I will, with the committee's agreement, include those in the response to the item 10 agenda item to the Democratic Boundary Commission Cymru draft annual response, because they relate to the same elements of that report anyway. And they're the ones I will follow up after the meeting, Chair, and circulate updates accordingly. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Alistair, you had your hand up.
I was just going to make reference to the things to be incorporated under item 8 in this agenda, but Democratic Services Manager has covered that.
Thank you, Alistair. Are there any other questions? Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On page 14, item 6, which is the clarification to be sought on the information held on the register of intimidating behaviour kept by a monitoring officer. That's down as having been raised first at the 13th of June meeting. It was actually raised on the 25th of March. So that item has been outstanding for quite some time. So it'd be useful to have early, resolution of that. And secondly, I'd just like to really ask whether the future of County Hall is a matter for this committee, and if so, whether it should be on the forward work programme.
So I didn't catch that last item, so councillor, what was the last item, sorry?
Yeah, whether the future of County Hall should be a matter for this committee, and if so, should it be on the forward work programme?
I would suggest that it wouldn't fall under the remit of this committee. It's more likely to be Cross, I would have assumed, with it being an asset and a council asset. So that's my sort of view on that, Councillor Parker. So it's not something this committee would have any reason to discuss or debate, because it's not part of well, of the future for the assets. This building, fair and the sort of member facilities is one item that comes under this committee here, but County Hall.
Are there any other questions with regards to the action items or the forward work plan?
Thanks, Chair. On the 26th of January, we're down to consider the options for recording votes at County Council to place. As far as I'm aware, the only process that is used in Wales is that one used by Rhondda Cynon Taf. So I don't really think there are many options on that. There's really one option that you can decide to go forward with or not. So I do feel that the amount of time that's spent on recording votes at this council, which can often add up to an hour on a council meeting, if we're looking what happens within Rhondda Cynon Taf when they can do a recorded vote in about 30 seconds, that should be one of our priorities. So if we could, rather than consider the options, to make a decision about how we go and record those votes, and perhaps say that we go and put in a pilot to go through. Perhaps we piloted at a scrutiny committee if they're small or whatever, or this committee indeed, or whatever. But we look at moving that process along a lot quicker than it's down for, please.
Chair, there are other authorities do have different mechanisms for recording votes. Some have microphones which they can press a button to record a vote. The others that use, I think the one you're referring to, is they use their software on their iPads or laptops in meetings. Others do have other buttons and type things they can press to record votes. From my point of view, and sort of to ensure that we do it effectively the first time, we probably need to look at how, it's maybe not the options we need to look at, it's the implications and how to implement it. Because if we're having 67 members in a chamber, not showing hands but using an electronic device to record a vote, we need to make sure that all members are comfortable using that functionality and facility, that they all bring their electronic items with them, whether it be an iPad or a laptop, because I know some members don't currently use one or the other. So it's just making sure that we can get it right the first time. So what I would be very reluctant to do is introduce it in a meeting without proper thought behind that, and it going wrong, and we then have to revert back to the paper and pen, and it just be embarrassing from my point of view for my service delivering that, but also from the council people watching. So I know, I understand where you come from in terms of it looks straightforward in practice, and one council do that, but that's probably evolved over time to get to that point. So from my point of view, it's something we are looking at certainly as a priority, because I do know it does take time, and it is quite difficult, certainly for the monitoring officer to sort of keep an eye on all the not just the room, but the people online as well who are voting. The screens do tend to move around, don't they, when people make a noise and what have you. So we are looking at that as a matter of urgency, and we will look to bring some, if not a proposal, to implement it in the very near future.
And so when we're looking at considering those options, will those options include estimates of cost? So I think that is an important side to it. Thank you.
Sorry, Jake, through yourself. Absolutely. We wouldn't just go say we're going to buy new microphones without, because they can run into significant sums of money. So we do need to make sure it's cost effective, and any change is beneficial to the process, but also under the constraints we work in relation to financial constraints as well. So all considerations will be factored into that. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? So there are 3 recommendations. One, that the committee considers the draft forward work programme and approve amendments necessary. 2, that the Democratic Services Manager, in consultation with the chair of the committee, be authorised to vary the forward work programme between meetings as the need arises. And 3, that the committee notes the progress made in completing the outstanding actions. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Sean Bibby, seconder. Councillor Andrew Parkhurst. All those in favour of all 3? Thank you. I think that's passed. Thank you. So we move on to item 5, review of the Planning Code of Practice to approve the changes to the Planning Code of Practice. And this item is going to be led by the Chief Officer Governance, Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. Fernando, good afternoon, everybody. So, Chair, the Planning Code of Practice is one of the protocols that we have within the Constitution to help supplement the Code of Conduct and explain how members, what the expectations are around members, and what is good behaviour in terms of considering and handling planning applications, because clearly the planning is a very significant and important function carried out by the council, and often is a highly contentious function carried out by the council, and we try to specify clear guidelines for members and officers in order to avoid potential grounds of complaint in relation to procedural process. The Planning Strategy Group is, for want of a better word, the owner of the document. And Planning Strategy Group, for those for members of the public and those who don't know, is drawn from senior members of the Planning Committee, experienced members of the Planning Committee, representing a variety of different groups. They reviewed the document following a suggestion by Audit Wales that the document needed to be reviewed back, I think, in March of this year. The document then, they made suggestions for a number of changes. The document then went to the Standards Committee, because clearly the Standards Committee has a role in ensuring that codes and protocols promote ethical behaviour within the council. The Standards Committee, as it says within the report, accepted all of the changes that were recommended by Planning Strategy Group and made an addition, and I'll talk a little bit about that addition in a moment. They made an addition, but essentially wanted to amplify some important and some aspects of the code of the protocol that they thought were important, and then they have recommended it to this committee. The addition made by the Standards Committee is around circumstances where a councillor is unable to act in relation to a planning matter in their own ward because they have a personal and prejudicial interest, and then they ask another member, either a fellow ward member or a member from another ward, to act in their stead in receiving and representing residents within the ward. The addition there was to say that whilst the councillor who is recusing themselves, stepping back from acting as ward member, needs to brief and explain circumstances to the person who will be taking their place or standing in their stead. What they shouldn't be doing is trying to influence the member who will stand in their stead. So they need to do a sort of a quick handover and then leave that member to get on with looking after the residents of that ward rather than seek to have a conversation with them. And the reason for that, Chair, is because, of course, the member's stepping back because they've got a personal and prejudicial interest. And what the Code of Conduct says is that if one has a personal and prejudicial interest, not only should you not seek to participate in council business, but you should also not seek to improperly influence council business. So what the Standards Committee in effect did was asked for a small section to be added, or a little bit of explanation to be added into the Planning Code of Practice to reflect that nuance or that requirement within the Code of Conduct itself. And it's just to make sure that the Planning Code of Practice is consistent with and fully reflects the Councillor's Code of Conduct itself. That was the most significant change, I think, to the document, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Do we have any questions, please? Is that a hand up, Andrew? Councillor Marshall, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. It concerns me that there's nothing in this Code of Practice about where the official source of relevant information that can be accessed by members, officers and the public. The specific location where all of this is held can be accessed by the Citizens Portal Planning. In 27 years of working on major railway projects, it was always understood that the location of all relevant documents was the document management system. Design documentation, project managers' instructions, requests for information, etc. were all there and accessible by anybody within the project. The rule was, if anything was not there, then it did not exist. The report is dated 20th of March 2025, which is before the June 2025 meeting, in which a large development was approved, and this resulted in a lot of criticism, disinformation and misinformation about what I said and did prior to and during the meeting. There is nothing about how to deal with unsolicited emails from objectors to a development. The lobbying section deals with local members being lobbied by developers. There is nothing in there about local objectors making contact with members whose wards are outside of the area that are eligible to vote in the planning meeting. I've had experience of a resident sending me 5 emails over a period of a week attempting to elicit my opinions about the application. I did not read any of them until after the June 2025 meeting. Had I responded, then it could be used as evidence of predetermination that made me ineligible to vote. The final email was threatening. There is nothing in the training about syllabus or points that are to be covered. There is nothing about how members should deal with unsolicited emails from residents objecting to proposals. It appears it is down to the member's personal preference what to do with them. The member can choose to read or not read, and there should be no criticism of what the member chooses to do. This is based upon the expectation that residents would have already written or emailed their objections to the planning team, and their redacted documents will already be on the Citizens Portal Planning for all to see. The number of objections received and registered on the portal can be substantial and impossible to read all of them in the time available. In the June 2025 meeting, there were 686 neighbour responses, some with having multiple emails. I calculated that it would take 13 uninterrupted 8-hour days to read them all within the 3 days available. This is an impossible task that I received criticism for not doing. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alan. Was there a question in that?
Fortunately not. I forgot the question. But it's an observation, really.
Well, thanks very much for that, Alan. Could you forward me on a written copy of what you've just said, please? Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Ibbotson, Alistair, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Three things, well, four things. First, regarding the point that the monitoring officer made about members acting in place of other members. The section, I think, is 423 on page 28 of the bundle. I'm assuming that it's 4232 that is the bit that's being referred to as having been added. But it doesn't specifically allow for the recusing member to brief the other person. It just says that they shouldn't improperly influence. So if the intention is to allow them to, inform the other member of the circumstances, I think that in order to cover members who are acting legitimately in that circumstance, specific reference that is allowed ought to be included. And I see the monitoring officers nodding, which I'm grateful for. So I'd suggest that change needs to be made. Secondly, the additions towards the end of the thing regarding statutory duties, the entirety of section 16. I have serious concerns about this because clearly those are not the totality of things that the planning committee is obliged to consider in making a determination. They are only some of them. Either we should list everything because it's all important and it all needs to be listed there, or we don't because it's planning committee's duty to be fully aware of the rules and there is training made available to them for that. But to list some things and exclude others seems irrational. It suggests that things that aren't listed there aren't significant considerations. These are the things that you really need to pay attention to, and everything else, well, it's not listed, it's not important, which is, of course, not the case. And there's no grounds for why these things have been suggested. And on a sort of more minute point within them, on page 40, I assume the section crime and order should be crime and disorder. I think the word order there is not as used. That phrase doesn't crime and disorder doesn't, maintaining public order does, but crime and order is a more sort of authoritarian kind of phrase that I don't think is necessarily used in the legislation. Thirdly, I would say that the process that this has been through with Planning Strategy Group, I've noted my concerns previously about the secretive nature of Planning Strategy Group. I don't think that it's a democratic, transparent, accountable way for this council to be carrying out its business. I understand that there are some considerations which, in planning terms, do need to be held in private because holding them in public could give advantages and information to developers on the council's positions, which it's not in the public interest to do. But we have part 2 and the right to withhold information in the public interest under the Local Government Act. And in any event, developing policies like this is work where there is no need to keep it private. And I think that to have this go to a committee which does not publish agendas, does not publish minutes, where members of this council who do not sit on it have no idea when the meetings take place. As far as I'm aware, there is not a published list of the members of that body. I think that it undermines public confidence. I'd also suggest that when this is being done in response to Audit Wales's feedback, obviously Audit Wales's point of view has been provided, presumably to the Planning Strategy Group, but when it comes to a public committee, this committee, we haven't been supplied with that. which I think might have been useful to brief members of this committee when they're analysing the changes made. And finally, I think Councillor Marshall has the germ of a point there, which is that it is very, very important for councillors to read all the information in relation to planning applications before they make decision. It's important that councillors read the papers for all meetings, I might add, but particularly so in the case of planning meetings. And it severely undermines public confidence in this council, and quite legitimately so, when members stand up and say, I haven't read the objections. And so I think in the code of practice, it needs to be spelled out. If you are making determinations on applications, you need to have read the background. I think that should be included within the planning code of practice.
Thank you for that, Alistair. I've just had a point of order from Councillor Marshall. Could we have the point of order, please, Councillor Marshall?
He's misrepresenting what I said. I didn't say I hadn't read all the objections. I said I hadn't read the emails. The emails are one thing, the objections are on the portal. There's too many to read all of them. It would take, as I said, 13 days to read it continuously. There's too much. You can't read all of it. Not with 686 respondents coming in. It's too much. So I'd like him to retract that, please.
Councillor Ibson, did you hear that from Councillor Marshall? He referred
I did.
to not reading
It wasn't
the
a point of
email.
order, I might add, but we can deal with that in the fullness of time. I'm happy to clarify my remarks. Councillor Marshall has said that he did not read all the objections lodged on the portal in the proper way, never mind other emails received from residents. He set out that he didn't read legitimately lodged objections before making a decision on the application, and I'm happy to clarify my remarks to that effect.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ibbotson. Councillor Bibby.
I think it needs to be noted, Mr. Chairman, that at Planning Committee and that the reports pack that is provided to members, that there is a summary of all the objections and the points that are made to them and the response from the planning officer. So provided that Councillor Marshall read that, I'm sure that would have encompassed all the issues that were raised by the various objections.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bibby. Gareth, would you like to comment on this, Chief Monitoring Officer?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. So the change to paragraph 4.2.3, yep, quite happy to add in that the ward member can brief the other member, but should not then go on to seek to improperly influence. That makes sense. Paragraph 16, quite happy to have a conversation with the Chief Officer for Place and Growth to see whether he wants to rethink that section. And I see I understand the point. If one doesn't list everything, and it is sometimes a challenge to make sure one does list everything, I can see the argument. I've heard the argument that sometimes it can be better to say nothing. We might need to point out that there are other things beyond just planning considerations that need to be taken into account. But it does seem to fall between two stools at the moment as it's drafted. Planning Strategy Group, of course, isn't the only committee or part of the council that considers the process. Whatever the criticisms that might be levied at that, and whether one accepts those criticisms, the document, of course, this document, of course, Chair, has subsequently been to the Standards Committee. This committee, and indeed, if approved by this committee, will go on to full council. So will be considered openly in 3 different places where presumably no questions can be raised about transparency or democracy. Do you know the addition that members must have read the papers in the background? I don't think that hurts. It would need to be carefully caveated. I would probably say that you members must read the papers in the background to make sure that they have a proper understanding of the planning application. But provided the committee is happy for that to be added, quite happy to do some drafting on that and to take it, to pop it into the version that goes to council, assuming it is approved and taken to that point. On that issue, Chair, about alterations to the drafting, just a question for yourself, Chair, and the committee. If we do rethink section 16, do you want it to come back to this committee, or are you happy for there to be a rethink of section 16 between now and the matter going to full council? Because ultimately, I'm assuming that at some point this would be recommended to full council for adoption. Do you want that? Are you going to do that today, or do you want to bring it back before making that recommendation? Because the changes can't be finalised without it going to full council, Chair.
Thanks very much, Gareth. Councillor Paul Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from that point there, I did note that the recommendation is to approve the alterations to the PCOP as identified in the appendix of the report. That's quite clear. What we're actually doing now, if we're going down this course, is we are changing the report. I think that it is most sensible, because I'm sure that when things are spoken out to you at a meeting, you're thinking what was said there. And I think just as to be secure and safe in the decisions that we go and make and the approving the changes that are made, that we can either postpone it while the changes are made and it comes back to this committee for approval. But I don't really feel I can approve the alterations when there's alterations to the alterations going forward. I would like to see them written down.
Thank you, Chair. Just as you say, this is, if you're going to change this document, realistically, personally, you should go back to the originators and start the process again, because this is some potentially significant change. And so, realistically, that the people in good faith have put this forward as their best idea. We've got some concerns about it. It should go back to them. Do they consider it and go back to the standards group? Do they happy with it? Start again, I think. Thank you.
Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The monitoring officer highlighted the changes in paragraph 4.2.3 on page 28, but those changes are not highlighted in any way. So there's no way that any member who reads this document would actually know what the changes are. So we can't possibly agree the recommendation because this change isn't highlighted. And I wonder if there are other changes which have been made which similarly aren't highlighted. And I'm curious why the changes which are highlighted haven't been covered in the introduction. Thank you, Chair. Thank
you for that, Andrew. Councillor Johnson again.
Apologise. Again, it's the process here. Just say the executive summary. This was reviewed by the Planning Strategy Group. Now, as a member of the Planning Committee, I know there's certain reports have come through to the Planning Committee about this. So I'm wondering whether, perhaps just to say that next time it comes through, this is actually considered by the Planning Committee, because there are many things on this thing here, on the proposals, on the PCOP, which actually talk about the role of individual members of the committee. For example, as a cabinet member myself is down there, and on the planning committee and on cabinet. And I think that the views of members of the planning committee should really be part of the process that we're going through on this. So could we recommend that time is found for the planning committee to go and consider it? Because very many of these issues are about them.
Thank you for that, Councillor Johnson. Just one moment, please. Could I ask Gareth to come in and give us his views on what has just been said by the various members?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things, I think, Chair. PSG, in my understanding, is drawn from members of the planning committee and is there to give as I said, it's senior members of the planning committee, so that we have the view of people who know whereof they speak. It has previously always been the practice that that body is trusted to speak on planning issues on behalf of the planning committee, such as this. If members want to take it through planning committee, fine. That will delay the process, but there isn't, I don't think, a hard deadline to which we have to work. I don't know that the changes were necessarily that significant and we'd need to take it back through all the process again. But again, if members want to do that, there isn't a hard deadline. Fine, we can do that. One thing I did miss out in terms of saying that we've not had the feedback supplied from Audit Wales. You have. I said it at the outset. The Audit Wales just recommended that we look at the document again because they thought that reviewing it because it hadn't been reviewed since 2021, it needed to be looked at again. That was it. There were no specific recommendations, and I covered that off in my verbal presentation of the item, Chair. So, Chair, I'm in the committee's hands as to where you want to take it today.
Thank you very much, Gareth. I'm going to invite Councillor Jones, even though he's not a member of the committee, to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Planning is part of my portfolio, so I'm just trying to be helpful to move progress. If you think about it, it's going to go through 3 committees and then on to full council before it gets to full council. And there will be times when each of those committees will be changing items potentially as it moves along the process. Might it be that at this committee that we join all those items that have been changed, if they have been changed in standards and here, and that we write an email to the chairs of the planning committee or planning PSG, so the chair can sign them off, and that way you just save a bit of time. I'm just trying to save some time for the committees, because otherwise you could go around in a circle continuous. The chair of the planning committee or the chair of PSG should be able to, request from the members of those committees whether they are happy with that. That should avoid this, circular motion where it can just come back to constitution and then go straight through to full council if everybody's in agreement. So it's just out there as an opportunity to save some time, really, rather than the process just continuing ad infinitum.
Thank you, Rich. So we've had quite a few comments from various members. Would anyone like to put forward a motion or a recommendation for us to move forward as an amendment to the actual recommendation that's before us?
Be a replacement,
or a replacement, really.
I'll move that one.
Okay. Oh shit! No, sorry.
Councillor Ibbotson, Alistair?
Yes, I would move that the 3 changes that the monitoring officer has kindly agreed to take forward and include within a further draft be taken forward by the committee. Personally, I'm of the view that this could, proceed to full council with those being included within that draft. But I think the consensus view of the committee is that most people would like for it to come back. So I shall move that it comes back.
Councillor Ibbotson, could you just clarify where you think it should be sent to and then come back from?
That a further draft be prepared with wording on those 3 items which we've agreed we would like to see covered, and that when that further draft is prepared, it comes back to this committee. If any other committees or groups wish to add it to their own work programme to consider the further drafts, well, that's up to those committees. I'm not suggesting that we remit it to any other committees. I'm saying that when we have a further draft, we consider it again here.
So just to clarify that, Councillor Iverson, your motion is that this should be returned to the planning strategy group with reference to the 3 changes? No.
No, that it should return to Constitution and Democratic Services Committee with a new draft prepared incorporating those changes.
Yes. From who? Chief Officer Monitoring, would you like to comment, please, Gareth?
I understand clearly what was being proposed, Chair. Is there a seconder for that? You've got a motion, Chair. Is there? You need to understand whether there's a seconder or whether somebody, if it's not seconded, whether anybody wishes to put something forward that can be seconded.
Councillor Parkhurst, are you seconding the motion? Thank you. We have a proposer. We have a seconder. All those in favour, can they raise their hands?
To see if I want to speak to it first.
Good.
Yeah, I need to speak to the proposal.
Who does? Would anyone like to speak to the proposal?
Yeah, I don't think that's a fair way of doing it, because I think you've given the right to PSG and Standards Committee to make their comments. By doing this, what you could actually undo, you could undo all the comments that they've made at this committee and accept them. You could say, well, the Standards Committee said this, but we don't like it. We'll just, so you're giving this committee a conclusive view. The only way you can do this, and if you want to make changes, is by going through the whole process again. Or, as I said, if you wanted to save time, you give it back to the chairs of the committees. Otherwise, you're negating the effort that PSG and Standards Committee have made.
I agree. I think it's basically, if you're going to do it properly, and I mean properly, and I don't agree with Councillor Jones's shortcut version of emailing, but go back to the beginning and let all the people who had their inputs to this debate it again and look at the amendments, proposed amendments, decide properly in a proper forum and start again.
Gareth, would you like to come in?
Chair, there's a couple of things on there. I understand the comments about potentially being stuck in a doom loop on this one, and about never getting beyond this stage. I appreciate that a councillor has just expressed a rather acerbic view about seeking views from the chairs of the other committees. I was going to offer to do that and to say, well, look, if it helps, Chair, I'm quite happy once I've made those changes just to visit past the chairs of those committees to see whether they wish to bring it back here, whether they wish to reconsider it. But perhaps if we express it in that way, though, that I send it to the chairs and ask whether they wish to take it back to their committee, not whether they're happy with it, but whether they wish to reconsider it at their committee. I would, of course, point out, Chair, that this is going to go to full council. It has to go to full council. All members get the opportunity to speak at full council. So when, nobody needs to fear that anybody is being excluded from the process, because, of course, all members will ultimately get the opportunity to comment on this.
Thank you for those comments, Gareth. Councillor Ron Davis, online.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to move the recommendation as it stood, Chairman, with the addition of Councillor Richard Jones's suggestion about it going to Chair of Committee. Thank you.
Unfortunately, Councillor Davis, we can't do that at the moment.
You've got the motion on the table.
You've got a motion on the table from Councillor Ibbotson. Councillor Bibby.
Shall we move to the vote, Mr. Chairman, if there's any more comments?
Are there any more comments to the proposal?
Chair, before you do move to the vote, because I'm conscious that a number of things are up in the air, should I just clarify what my understanding as the person who will be actioning this is of what I'm being asked to do? There are 3 changes to be made to the document. Paragraph 4.2.3, rethink section 16, and then add in a bit about reading the papers and properly understanding the issues. Once I've made those changes, I am to send it to the chairs of the bodies that have considered this matter so far, ask whether they wish to take it back to their committee or their body, and then, if it's necessary, take it through those committees again, bring it back here, ready then for approval, for recommendation to full council. So that's my understanding of what I am being asked to do at this stage, Chair. And I think that captures the proposal.
Thank you for that, Gareth. Alistair, can you confirm that is in your proposal in its entirety?
Yes, absolutely. I was about to exercise right of summing up, and the monitoring officer has done my job for me quite elegantly. Yes, the motion says that these changes are made and it comes back here. Obviously, any other committee has the complete freedom to put this on their own agenda should they wish. Equally, we're not forcing them to discuss it if they think, yeah, you just get on with it. It's the common sense view.
Thank you for that, Alistair. As a seconder, Councillor Parkes, do you agree with that? Thank you for that. So can we go to the vote, please? All those in favour, raise their hands. Yeah. That is passed, Councillor Ibbotson and Gareth. Thank you. Oh, sorry, that was still on, wasn't it? Right. The next item on the agenda is item 6, the review of the Flintshire Standard. It's on pages 43 to 52. And to approve changes to the standard. And this again is Chief Officer Governance.
Thank you.
Sorry, point of order, Chair, Mr. Chairman. Before we move on to the next item, I know there were some members who didn't vote for that, and I wonder whether you might wish to give them the opportunity to vote against or abstain, so they can, give them the opportunity to set out their position.
Thanks for that, Councillor Ibbotson. I didn't actually see anyone who voted against it. It seemed to be unanimous. But anyway, I will comply with what you're asking. Is there anyone who wanted to vote against the last recommendation on item 5? Are there any abstentions? Simon Jones has abstained. We don't explain. This is getting confusing, this is. Right, can we move on to item 6, please, which is the review of the Flintshire Standard, and the person bringing this is Chief Officer Governance.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I didn't start the last item with an apology for not having a tracked changes version of the document, because I thought the changes were relatively modest and were described within the report. For this item, though, I will start with an apology for not having a tracked changes version of the document. It is normal practice. On this occasion, a mistake was made, and the document was saved, and the changes were accepted, and the document was saved, effectively losing track of all of the changes that had been made. It might make it a little difficult, therefore, for members to follow some of what is being proposed. I am happy to talk through those. Members do, of course, have a clean copy of the document in front of them, so they can say whether or not they're happy with the document as it stands. But I appreciate some of the difficulties about not having tracked changes to hand. With that said, Chair, I'll run through what I was going to say about the report, and I was going to talk in a little detail about this because there are some significant changes. I'm conscious that members don't want me just to repeat the report, but I'll talk through the issues and highlight some of the key points. The Flintshire Standard is our local resolution protocol. We adopted it about 2014, and we adopted it based on models that were circulating at the time. There were 2 or 3 different models in Wales, or 2 to 3 that had other councils had adopted, and we picked this one and made it our own because we liked the fact that it set out at the beginning what expected behaviours were before then going on to set out a process that could be followed for trying to resolve complaints locally rather than referring them on to the Ombudsman's office. There was a review by the Ombudsman's office of all the LRPs in Wales, and there were some perceived problems with some of the models, including a perceived problem with our own model. Some of those perceptions were that, or some of the perceived problems were that models didn't particularly specify when the LRP was suitable for use and when it wasn't. It left quite a lot of discretion to the monitoring officer. We've tried to address that within this model, and we've tried to address that with the changes within the model. A more significant challenge, I think, in relation to the model that we did have, alongside a number of other councils, was that it had 3 stages, and the 3rd stage included the potential for there to be a hearing in front of the Standards Committee. Now, the problem with that, Chair, is that the LRP is an informal process in the sense that it is non-statutory. It does not exclude or oust the right of a complainant to complain to the Ombudsman. And you will see that that's very explicitly stated within the document. Now, the challenge, Chair, is what happens if you go through all 3 stages of the process as it used to exist. The member or the complainant remained dissatisfied and then made a complaint to the Ombudsman, because what the Ombudsman can do, having investigated his complaint, is refer it back to the Standards Committee for a hearing. So there was this potential, not that we'd ever experienced it, but there was the potential, at least, that the Standards Committee might make a determination in relation to a complaint only on a non-statutory basis, only for it then to be referred back to them by the Ombudsman on a statutory basis, only to find that they have, having already made a determination, predetermined themselves such that they would not then be able to carry out their statutory role. So effectively, it would be like going in front of a court for a preliminary view, only then to have to go back to the court formally for an official view. Well, of course, once the court's given a preliminary review, it can't give an official view. So one of the biggest changes that has been recommended by the Standards Committee is the removal of stage 3 from the process. Stage 3 were sat rather uncomfortably with the process, if I might say, Chair. In my experience, having used the LRP over a number of years, because stages 1 and 2 of the process are essentially mediatory. They're about the parties sitting down, looking again at their behaviour and considering where they might have acted differently, how their behaviour might have had unintended consequences, and through self-reflection, perhaps coming to an agreement about how the complaint might be resolved or how they might behave differently in the future. Whereas stage 3 was essentially going to an independent third party and asking them to rule on the rights and wrongs of the situation. So that's a process. That's an arbitratory process rather than a mediatory process. So stage 3 sat rather uncomfortably with stages 1 and 2 in the old process. What I've tried to do, Chair, is with the confusion of stage 3 or the distraction that stage 3 represented removed from the process, I've tried to make clear that this is an essentially mediatory process. We've tried to clarify in the light of experience certain stages of that process. So we've put a clear explanation in as to when it is appropriate and when it's not appropriate to use the process. We have clarified the point at which group leaders are to be involved, because a number of members have asked for group leaders to be involved at stage 1. the process, which again creates this problem of them being involved too early when actually they're needed for stage 2. So they need to keep their hands clean, so to speak, for stage 2. We have recently experienced a couple of LRPs where there have either been multiple complainants and a single member about whom the complaint is being made, or a single complainant complaining about a number of members. And we needed to clarify what to do, whether to deal with those singly, and which obviously risks duplication and extra resource being taken up, or whether to deal with them collectively. And what I thought about, and I've made a suggestion about that, Chair, which is to give the individual the choice. So where there are multiple, if there are multiple complainants, it's up to the individual member who's being complained about to decide whether or not they wish to deal with them separately or together, because they are that is the person who risks being, quotes, outnumbered. And where there is a single person making a complaint about multiple members, then again, it would be the single complainant who gets the choice about whether or not to deal with the individual separately or together. Again, based on this perception of not wanting somebody to feel as though they are either outnumbered or that they're going to be. Nobody would, but you know, this feeling that they might be ganged up on as part of the process. Chair, I'm picking up some background noise. I think perhaps somebody's not on mute. So I've tried to deal with that. And the last thing that I tried to deal with in the changes, Chair, is I've experienced a situation now, which one might think you wouldn't necessarily experience, where a complaint is made, but then it's not actually taken forward or progressed by the individuals concerned. And so you will see that I've added, whilst we always had a provision within the process that you couldn't bring a complaint after more than 90 days, we didn't have anything that said, and when you do bring a complaint, you've got to get on with it. And if you don't get on with it, then we can treat the process as having been abandoned. And so we've added that in out of fairness, not only to the member about whom the complaint is made, but also to myself, Chair, because I have found myself on a number of occasions having to go back to say, well, look, are we going to take this forward? Are we going to take this forward? Are we going to take this forward? So it utilises my time in a way that perhaps isn't very productive as well, Chair, as well as dragging things out for the member concerned. So those are the changes to the process, Chair. There have not been significant changes to the behaviours that are expected, but there are some points of clarification. So that to say that in terms of behaviours, members shouldn't publish anything that's insulting about officers or fellow members. It was always, I think that was always very much the spirit of the standard, but it wasn't specifically said there. We've added in about respecting diversity because that's a requirement within the code anyway, but we want to make sure that we don't get comments that are homophobic or racist or ableist or whatever. There is a requirement around responsible social media use, a requirement to expect the chair to be respectful. Now, we already had a requirement that you had to respect the chair, but it wasn't reciprocal. And so we've made that reciprocal. And just put in something about making sure that, or a prohibition on making remarks which may be deemed offensive. Again, very much, as I say, within the spirit of the standard as it was previously drafted, but trying to add some clarity, Chair, around the process and around the expectations. So, Chair, that's what I wanted to say. I'm happy to take questions, Chair, if there are any.
Thank you for that, Gareth. I know it's not been approved yet, so the chair can be insulting at the moment and doesn't have to be respectful. So that's quite good. Okay, first one, which one? Councillor Ibbotson, I believe you're first on the list. I'm trying to check whose hand up went up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The changes suggested by the monitoring officer, make sense. They're fine, no issue with them. But it would be remiss of me when we're reviewing the Flintshire Standard not to bring up the other parts of it that desperately need review, because this document is not particularly fit for purpose as it's currently written. If I can draw members' attention to page 47 in the document pack, this is the first page of the appendix. The fourth paragraph on there: freedom of speech, particularly political expression, is important within a democratic society, and quite rightly it is. In exercising the right to free speech and when acting on council business, the following standards are expected of Flintshire County Council members. Now, if we look at the first list on there, behaviour towards others and public behaviour, some of those, indeed most of them, are do not do such and such a thing, which is, fine. But the first one on there, show respect to each other and officers. We're saying that you must show respect, not you must not show disrespect, which would be, a perfectly legitimate thing to do, but we are placing an obligation on people to show respect. So if you make a contribution that is just neutral, where, there's no need to reference anybody else, and so you don't show any respect to anybody else, then that is a prima facie breach of the silly wording of the Flintshire Standard. Equally, if we skip down to behaviour in meetings, the very bottom one on there, exclude officers from the scope of political remarks. Again, quite worthy, one might say. And on the first list again, behaviour towards others, the second to bottom one on there is do not accuse or imply that officers are acting from political motives. On the first list, don't do this, that's fine, you just don't do it and you're fine. But on the second list, it produces an explicit obligation. When you speak, you must exclude officers from the scope of political remarks, which is very vague and also potentially applies when one isn't making any political remarks. So I would quite like to say in making this contribution that I exclude all officers from political remarks. The wording of this is, these are nice sentiments, but they're very vague, they're very general, they're written in a way that places active duties rather than prohibitions on problematic behaviour. And the sum effect is that we can end up with very, very silly LRP complaints that are never going to go anywhere, that if they were made to the Ombudsman would get laughed out. No case to answer, not a breach of the code, definitely not in the public interest. And we can tie the monitoring officer's time up and members' time up in dealing with silly complaints because of the poor wording of some of these duties on members. If we're going to review the Flintshire Standard, we need to rewrite this bit as well. And so whilst I welcome the changes that the monitoring officer has proposed to the LRP process, the abolition of stage 3, I think all of that, everything he said is eminently sensible and I wholeheartedly support. But let's not miss this opportunity when we are reviewing this anyway to deal with the problematic language in the first bit.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ibbotson. Would you like to respond to that, Chief Officer Governance?
Gratified to hear that the proposals are okay. What I would say, Chair, is if members wish to review the expected behaviours, could we decouple that from the process? Because I have to manage the process in the meantime. There are a number of LRPs. There are a number underway, and there no doubt will be more over the coming months. Improvements in the process are desperately needed. So I would ask if members want to review the standards, then could we review the process, recommend that for approval, whilst asking to have another look at the comments themselves. I can certainly, where we have positive duties, I can certainly rephrase those into prohibitions on negative behaviour, Chair. The one about excluding officers from political remarks, ironically, actually, Chair, Councillor Ibbotson is very good at this, and exemplifies the sort of behaviour that he said it's a wishy-washy, and he's criticised it. Actually, Councillor Ibbotson is very good at saying, well, when I make this comment, Chair, I intend no criticism of officers, and that's very much what that was intended for, because we had a council meeting some years ago before that was included within there, where comments were made, and the comments were actually being made about cabinet, but because of the wording that was used, appeared to be referring to officers. And we came out of that meeting, everybody came out of that meeting, group leaders, members and officers came out of that meeting with a determination to review the standard and to change that list of expected behaviours. And that was one of the things that was put in as a result of that meeting. That was back about early 2019, I think, Chair. And that was one of the comments that was specifically included at the request of members. So I'm quite happy. It's important, Chair, because it does confine the political. It confines the political debate to members, and it excludes officers from that, because, of course, we are not part of the political debate. We try to assiduously avoid being part of the political debate. If there is a suggestion, Chair, for how that might be rephrased to retain the sense whilst tightening up the wording, I'm certainly quite happy to try and reflect that if we can. So, a couple of things there, Chair. Can we move the process forward in relation to the process? And quite happy to look again at rewording things. And if there are any specific suggestions for what changes might be made, again, quite happy to consider them, add them in, either as part of before bringing it back here, or before it goes on to the next step of the process, Chair.
Thank you for that, Gareth. Would you like to come back on that, please, Councillor Ibbotson?
Yes, I'm grateful for the monitoring officer's constructive approach to the criticism that I've made there. I take the monitoring officer's point about not throwing the baby of the reforms to the LRP process out with the bathwater of the wording of the standard. Therefore, I would move the recommendation as drafted, that the changes shown in Appendix 1 are approved, and then a second point that a review of the wording of the Flintshire standard, in regards to the duties, be included as an item on the forward work programme for this committee. In terms of the monitoring officer's point about excluding officers from political criticism, I completely respect the intention of it, and yes, the monitoring officer is correct. I am assiduous in doing it myself. Councillor Ibbotson knows the code and doesn't wish to fall foul of it. But in terms of how that might be reworded, I'd suggest that we've already hit on it, because the way that exact sentiment is worded in the first list, do not accuse or imply that officers are acting from political motives. If one is clear in what one is saying, that it doesn't imply that they are, then there is no need to specifically exclude them from that. So if I stand up and say, Cabinet have done X, Y, and Z, and that's awful, there's no implication that officers have been involved in doing X, Y, and Z, and that's awful, because I've said that Cabinet are, and I've been very clear about that. There shouldn't really be a need of a duty of, oh yes, and I would like to say at this point that officers are great, and then, that's just a waste of everybody's time in meetings. And if somebody forgets to say it, then they're potentially got on the LRP. So I think that the wording, we've already got it here. But yes, I'm certainly happy to constructively work with the monitoring officer outside this meeting to suggest reforms.
Thank you, Councillor Ibbotson. I think you'd won that argument about 5 minutes ago. So can we have a new motion?
Just before.
Well, I was advised to go back to him to reply to the monitoring officer.
With that, just on that, I was actually going to ask, because you are a member of the Standards Committee. The Standards Committee has reviewed this, and I do really feel that a committee which is made up of both councillors and lay people has been through this in probably great detail, because I know what Standards Committees like. Very, very thorough, bringing in outside eyes. And so my first point would be, would you like to give us your views on this here as a member of the Standards Committee? Sure, in brief, which I'm sure you can do.
In brief, and you want a commitment of me, thanks, Paul. In brief, this has been through Standards Committee, discussed, the wording's been approved. Yes, it might not be the wording that everybody would agree to. We can all change T's and I's and etc. But the idea behind it, the desirability of it, stands as it is, as far as I'm concerned. So personally, I don't have a problem with the Flintshire Standards as it is written here. Councillor Parkhurst.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the second item on this agenda where there have been changes made to a document where we have not had the tracked changes, and it's made it very difficult for us as a committee to see what has changed. The essence presented was that the local resolution process was being changed, but we actually learned that the Flintshire Standard has been changed. It's been reviewed by the Standards Committee, and there are changes to that document which have not been highlighted specifically on the pack. They have been mentioned verbally, but not on the pack. So we haven't had prior opportunity to consider them. We also haven't had the opportunity to look through the existing wordings of the Flintshire Standard, and I have several reservations about some of these. I think the Flintshire Standard is designed to stifle councillors from expressing themselves forthrightly. There are some aspects which are not necessary. For example, it says, do not accuse each other or officers of lying or falsifying facts or documents. And then it goes on to say, do not make malicious allegations against each other or officers. So that former statement is not needed, because if we are prohibited, quite rightly, not to make malicious allegations against each other, that therefore covers the aspect of lying or falsifying facts or documents. But if someone was falsifying facts or documents, that needs to be brought out. We can't be sent off to the Ombudsman because we have found something which is completely false and perhaps deliberately false, but we are prevented from highlighting that. That is an abuse of power. We must not allow that. And then it goes on to say that we do not accuse or imply that officers are acting from political motives. Well, hopefully they never will. But what if they are? We have to be allowed the freedom to express things which are clearly evidenced. Otherwise, we're not acting in the public service. So we need to review this document thoroughly, not to have it, well, the appearance seems to be that because the focus was on the local resolution process, that the other changes are being sort of slipped through. That is the perception, and that is not right. And the actual recommendation says that the changes shown in Appendix 1 are approved. Well, I can't find an Appendix 1 as such. And these changes aren't highlighted, so we can't approve them. And when it comes to the local resolution process, I have just a couple of comments. On page 49, it says, this is not suitable where it is motivated by discrimination. But what if someone makes a sort of silly, innocent remark? Suppose someone, comments about age, for example, where there's no intention to discriminate, but it's just a sort of casual, silly remark. Are we saying that really has to go to the Ombudsman and we can't resolve things locally? That seems over the top. to me. So I think this needs a thorough review, Chair.
Gareth, as the Chief Officer of Governance, would you like to respond to those comments?
A couple of things, a couple of points, Chair. I've already apologised about the lack of track changes. The existing process is, it said members haven't had the opportunity to review it. The existing process is published on the website. It is available, Chair. I appreciate it's not presented perhaps for ease, but it is available. It's not that we've hidden it away anywhere. I understand if members wanted to see a tracked changes version. I'm quite happy to. I think there's probably a way of recreating the tracked changes and bringing it back if that's what members want. I must take issue about the point about members wanting to accuse officers of acting for political motives. No, Chair, you don't do that in committee. However justified the member might feel in making it, however much evidence the member might feel they have about making it, you do not do that in committee. That is one of the fundamental rules of local government. We have protocols around that, Chair. We have protocols for how we deal with that. And it is not to make accusations about officers to which they cannot respond in committee, because we can't turn around and say, we can't turn around and disagree and defend themselves in committee. It is fundamentally unfair for that to happen, Chair. And should never happen. I'm not saying that you can't deal with the issue, but you don't deal with it in committee, and that's the point about the Flintshire Standard. Chair, there was one other point. I've lost it now for the time being. I didn't make a note at the point where I was going through and writing down my notes. I know what it was, Chair. It was about where we are in the process, Chair. At the moment, Chair, I think you have a motion that has been moved. I'm not aware that it has been seconded. So again, we're at the point where you need to, there either needs to be a seconder, or if there is going to be a different proposal, then Councillor Ibbotson needs to withdraw his motion in favour of, an alternative suggestion that you have another look at this and bring it back to a subsequent meeting. So there's something there you need to be about process, Chair, about just exactly where we are and how this is going to proceed, or what the next steps will be from this point, what the resolution of the committee will be.
Thank you for that, Gareth. What I'm going to ask now is for Steve to actually read out the two motions before us, the original recommendation and the extra recommendation that was provided and agreed by yourself and Councillor Ibbotson, and then we'll take it from there if members are happy with that, or whether they want to comment on it after Steve has written it out. Could you read it out again, please, Steve?
I'll read out what was moved, Chair. But
Yep.
just to be clear, you haven't had a seconder. So this is what was proposed by Councillor Ibbotson. Correct me if I may have summarised it, Councillor Ibbotson, but so the recommendation one as written in the document was that the changes shown in Appendix 1 are approved. That a review of the Flintshire Standard is I can't read my own writing, sorry, is in regards to the duties to to be included as an item on the full work programme for this committee. So that's the motion put forward for two recommendations to committee. So whether the committee have a second within the committee to do that.
Yeah. Do we have a seconder for that? No.
No.
Before we continue, Councillor Jones wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, it's just again to move progress. I think because of the recommendation, and I'm just trying to assist here, the recommendation asks you to accept the changes, which quite rightly Councillor Parker has said it's very difficult to see. The original document is actually section 20 of the Constitution, so it is available. And I think my own personal view would be it'd be better for it to come back to this committee to show that differences between the documents in front of us now and the one that's on section 20 of the Constitution. You could then see the differences and accept them as required. That's just my view.
Councillor Johnson.
I move deferral.
Councillor B.
Second, Councillor Johnson.
So we've got a proposal to defer.
Excuse me, Chair. I did have my hand up to second Councillor Ibbotson, but I wasn't called. Thank you.
See that hand. So back then, in that case, Chair, I've got my laptop in front of me, so it would be helpful if electronic hands were raised, but that's the separate issue. So in that case, Chair, we go back to the original, in my where we're at now. If we had a second at the time, then Councillor Ibbetson's motion stands with the two recommendations put forward. So it would need to go to members to speak to those that motion with the two recommendations, or if there's no speakers, to go to the vote in terms of whether to accept that or not, Chair.
Right, thank you. Could you kindly just repeat those two recommendations, please?
Just test my own handwriting, Chair. That the changes as shown, the changes shown in Appendix 1 are approved. That a review of the Flintshire Standard in regards to the duties be included as an item on the full work programme for this committee. Two that were agreed.
And those two recommendations have been proposed by Councillor Ibbotson and seconded by Councillor Brockley.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
Do we have any comments to the motion? You've got your hand up again, Councillor Ibbotson, but bear in mind you spoke extensively on your own motion.
And his right reply as well.
So you've got your right to reply, but that's it.
I shan't take it.
So
Is there any speakers? So is anyone speaking to that or not?
does anyone want to sum up and speak to the motion? Recommendation, sorry. It's getting confusing. Right, in that case, can I have a vote on those recommendations, please? All those in favour? Councillor Ibbotson, Councillor Brockley. I can't see any others, so that's 2, 4. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 8 against.
10, Chair.
Sorry?
10 I counted.
Oh, 10. Okay. Any abstentions? Councillor Thew, anyone else? Okay. That motion is defeated. So do we go to the deferral now?
So if no, they need to repropose their.
Would you like to Thank you.
Deferral second.
Second, please.
Chair, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Chair. Can you just explain the implications for a deferral?
That's for the monitoring officer to do that, Chair. So
Yeah.
Chair, my understanding of the point about deferral would be that I'll go away, I'll recreate the tracked changes so that members are able to easily distinguish what is being proposed in terms of changes and then bring it back to a subsequent meeting.
So I think all members have had clarification. It's been the recommendation to defer has been proposed. It's been seconded. The Chief Officer of Governance has explained what will happen with the deferral. Can I now ask members to vote? All those in favour of the deferral? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
go to against.
Thank you for that.
Any against?
Although any against? It's very difficult online.
Abstentions.
There are no against. Any abstentions? No. Okay. The recommendation is proved to defer this matter. Sorry, we move on to item 7. Item 7 is the consultation on extending the duty on local authorities to broadcast meetings. To consider the response to the Welsh Government consultation on whether the duty to broadcast meetings should be extended. And this is the Democratic Services Manager, Steve. I hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, members will see before them that I've summarised a report that outlines the reasons behind the consultation that the Welsh Government are undertaking currently. In the 2021 Local Government and Elections Wales Act, they mandated that full council meetings of principal authorities should be broadcast live. That's something we do. And the only other stipulation from that act was that all the meetings should be offered remotely. It didn't necessarily require that the national park authorities or the fire and rescue authorities live stream broadcast their meetings. And it mentioned it doesn't refer to any retention periods for any recordings that are held in the act. And what they're looking to do now is to consult relevant parties on whether they to extend the broadcasting duty to other meetings, and they do provide a list of those meetings later in the document, and whether they should also impose that duty on the FRAs, fire rescue authorities, and national park authorities, and whether to look at a retention period. So I think it's important to note that the Flintshire County Council took a decision at the time to live stream broadcast all of our meetings that are being looked at under this consultation. And they are listed in paragraph 104, Chair. So the Democratic Services Committee, which is the committee that we're in today, the Constitution and Democratic Services Committee, Governance and Audit, Licensing, Planning, Overview and Scrutiny Committees, and Standards Committee, and Cabinet meetings. We do live stream broadcast all of those meetings. And so we fulfil and go beyond that statutory duty. So what they're looking for is to whether whether our view is that all meetings should be the same, or whether they need to extend that further. Likewise, whether that should be incumbent on the national park authorities and the fire and rescue authorities to do the same. As the document says, that the national park authorities do currently broadcast their meetings live, and this is all Wales, so it's not just the North Wales, and the fire and rescue authorities, some do, some don't, so there's no standards, so they're looking to standardise that for people to be able to see. And then they're looking at retention periods for those meetings, to whether they should come in line with physical copies of minutes, because minutes do vary amongst different authorities and different meetings across across Wales and beyond. So what they're saying is that the actual record of a meeting does give flavour to the context of the meeting. Just as on a side note, that as a Flintshire County Council, we have an open retention period, so our meetings are available ad infinitum, so until such time as they're no longer available and likely, so they are available forever. The closing date is the 28th of November, and I have produced in Appendix 1 some suggested responses for committee to consider and comment on, amend as they feel necessary. So I'm happy to open the floor to committee members, Chair. And
thank you for that, Steve. The first person with a hand up was Councillor Bibby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, looking over the questions and the answers, there's pretty much support everything. I think, you know, the broadcasting the meetings and having them publicly available and retaining, I think, is necessary for us to be able to have that accountability and to give the members of the public the opportunity to see our proceedings. Ultimately, every one of us sitting around this table is here to represent the people of Flintshire, and I think, you know, the people of Flintshire should have full access to every debate and discussion. as members of this council, every decision we make should be accountable to our residents, and we should be ensuring there are ways that the residents of Flintshire can see everything that goes on in a transparent manner. Again, I believe it should be the case again with National Park authorities and Fire and Rescue Authority. I think just some further clarification is just needed, and I think this is quite a tricky one. You know, in particularly in how we deal with the Welsh language. Now, I know at the moment what usually happens, and I think it's just rather informal. And I know from the fact that when I've addressed meetings through the medium of Welsh, I know that Councillor Ian Roberts as leader used to do quite a lot. I know that Councillor Marshall has. I think we've just rather informally spoken Welsh and then provided a translation in English, repeated what we said in the English language. So I'm just sort of, I think because the language, obviously we would wish to have the Welsh language used as much as possible, but I think realistically, given the fact that the vast majority of members and our residents don't speak Welsh, it isn't used as much as maybe in other authorities. And I know that Gwynedd and Anglesey have the default that they operate through the medium of Welsh quite naturally because the majority of their residents and councillors are first language Welsh speakers. But it's just striking the balance to ensure that we can have the language being used, but also I would imagine that translation facilities, to what extent they exist, can be quite resource intensive. So I'm just wondering how that's going to sort of align, whether to get that balance to ensure that we've got able to facilitate that, but we're not having a resource just sitting there, you know. So some clarification, and again, how does that align with our standards that we have to meet with the Welsh Language Board and our commitments? So maybe if appreciate probably it's Gareth that will respond to that, but if he can provide some clarification on that, that'd be much appreciated.
Chair, I can answer some of that in terms of the Welsh language. I actually had a meeting with Fiona Mochko yesterday, who is the Welsh, she looks after the Welsh language standards and policy for the council. And we are looking how we can encourage the use of Welsh amongst staff and members. So there is a move within the council to encourage the use of the Welsh language and promote that, because that's one of the Welsh Government's also ambitions and aims, isn't it, to increase the use and Welsh language speakers across the country. So I think it probably sits quite nicely with that, because it does allow members and officers to use the Welsh language in meetings on the proviso that they are able to sort of translate themselves at the meeting, and as it becomes more used and more widespread use, it will help. I think it will help a knock-on effect of help promote the Welsh language through the county as well, and encourage other users. So I think in the short term, my view would be to leave as is and sort of build that up moving forward. We also need to undertake an audit of which members are able to speak Welsh and at what level will it be, in level 1 through to 4, and that work is being undertaken over the next few weeks, because although some members do, like you say, Councillor Roberts and yourself have, and Councillor Eastwood have spoken in the Welsh medium at meetings, other members, in all likelihood, and I can see Councillor Marshall's got the lanyard which does have the Cymraeg symbol on there, may in actual fact be able to converse fluently. Apologies, it's on the tape. So there are other members that can do that. So I think in the short term, in terms of, I'd be reluctant to go fully bilingual, because there's quite a lot of implications in terms of the system setup, resourcing, financial implications of doing that for what benefit that would achieve. But I think it's on the right sort of first step on the road to encouraging and promoting the Welsh language ourselves. So that's sort of if that helps Councillor Bibby in that response there.
Gareth, Chief Officer Governance, would you like to make any comment?
Sorry, Chair, just having trouble finding the button there. I don't think I need to add anything to what Mr. Goodrum has said.
Thank you for that. Councillor Parkhurst.
Diolch yn fawr, Chair. I welcome largely the responses to this consultation. I'd just like to add on page 57 and page 59 to questions 3 and 9, where it says quite rightly, in my view, that the corporate joint committees, including their subcommittees, should be included in this, in that that they have meetings which are broadcast and available to the public. I'd like to add to that the Welsh Local Government Association. I'd like to see those words included under both of those questions. The WLGA gives the appearance of being so secretive that it would make the Freemasons on this council blush. It's very hard to get for the public to know what's going on. There's no reason why their meeting shouldn't be broadcast, or indeed to have minutes of their meeting on their website. But unless you actually ask for these documents, it's very hard to get them. So I'd like to see the WLGA added to questions 3 and 9, please.
Councillor Ibbotson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, if Councillor Parkhurst is moving that as a proposal, I am happy to second it. I would associate myself with the remarks made by Councillor Bibby in his contribution. This is incredibly welcome, but I must admit to a degree of dismay that Welsh Government didn't get the job right the first time when introducing the regulations, that they now have to come back and take a second pass at it. The Welsh Government is constantly saying that they don't have enough Senedd time to pass legislation that actually makes a positive difference to the people of Wales, and they're expanding the Senedd in order to get more members to do that at great cost to the people of Wales. And yet they've got the time to take 2 goes at getting this right. So I would register my disappointment that it's taken them so long to get there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ibbotson. Councillor Paul Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, overall, I'm in agreement. However, I'd be grateful of an amendment, probably for question 1. We've all said in this council that every time the Welsh Government introduces a duty, then the money should come from somewhere. This is an extension to a duty. It is not cost-free by any means. I think that if I was to go and ask the question to the Head of Democratic Services, have there been any extra costs introducing broadcasting live? I'm sure, well, his response says there are, quite clearly. We do have some very long meetings, which probably will incur quite a few staff costs. So I think, again, tying my colleagues' comments about the Welsh language there, I do feel that we should make the point that where a duty is expected of councils, they should be that this should be funded by the Welsh Government. I'd like that placed in. Probably question 1, question 2. I couldn't quite work out where I would put it in, but I do think costs is an important side to it. And then the final thing is that when we go and put that forward about the duty, does this mean that it's now basically the guidelines and practice for this authority? Because we all agreed these are what we should be doing. Does that make it into does that give it any formal standing as guidelines or duty about the way we should approach things?
Chair, I'm happy to include the comments as stipulated by Councillor Johnson. In terms of, we already do the bulk of this anyway as an authority, and on the full work programme, I think it's January, the meeting, there is the whole Local Government Elections Wales Act 2021 as a bulk document coming back to committee to review our progress against each of the requirements, and some are mandatory and some are guidance. This, when it was initially introduced, was guidance, and they are looking to mandate it. So I think we're well ahead of the game in terms of where we are in the position. So I don't think there's any further obligations on us as an authority to do anything more. We currently do everything as what they're proposing to do and beyond. Actually, we go above and beyond in terms of how we deliver this part of the document that they've issued.
So, sorry, are there any other speakers on the matter? So, from the comments from the members, just to clarify, question 1, Councillor Johnson wanted to clarify exactly who's going to pay for this.
Welsh Government goes and introduces a duty or an extension to a duty, and the Welsh Government should find money to go and pay for it. If there's social services, it was education, it was street scene or whatever, we would say the same thing, because it's democracy, the same should apply. No double standards.
Okay. Just listening to Councillor Johnson's comments, for those to be added to question 1. With regards to question 3, Councillor Parkhurst has asked for the WALGA to be actually added to the answer. Question 9, again, Councillor Parkhurst has asked for the WLGA to be added to the response to question 9. I think I've covered them all. So taking those amendments and changes to the draft response, can we ask someone to propose the recommendation? Councillor Parkhurst, do we have a seconder? Councillor Coppell, all those in favour? I think we've got a full house. Anyone? Thank you. Anyone against? No. Any abstentions? Oh, I think that was passed. Thank you. So, item 8, pages 61 to 70. Review of Constitution, ensuring democracy functions effectively. To provide the committee with details how the items not included within the review of the Constitution will be considered. That's on page 61 to 70.
I'll take that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Members of the committee will be mindful and recall that the committee has undertaken a review of the Constitution, and feedback was sought from wider members and chief officers and senior officers for elements to be included in that review. When they were all compiled and collated, there was some elements and some suggestions that didn't quite sit within the work streams that were identified for the 3 working groups that were formed. So rather than sort of lose them or put them on the back burner, what I'm looking to do here is to capture them in a document, which is Appendix 1, categorise them into the sort of areas where some are relatively straightforward to deliver, such as typos or reducing or clarifying the number of scrutiny committees from 6 to 5 in the Constitution. So quite minor amendments to the document, which don't really warrant sitting under any sort of work programme or element. So they will be done as part of the redraft. And then obviously there's those that fit within the working groups, and then there's some that are standalone pieces of work. And what I've looked to do in Appendix 1 is identify those elements where they stand alone and suggest a committee meeting where they come back to for consideration. And that includes Appendix 1, the first part. There's still a couple of items to as on page 67 to determine where they fit, but they can be done in due course. And then the final sort of part, as I mentioned, is that they're the minor amendments, so they're all captured there within the document as well. So there are some pieces of work which do fit under other reviews, and there is one on the work programme about reviewing of the petition scheme, etc., and also that the non-statutory guidance for principal councils do cover some of these off. So that will be done as part of that review as well. So I'm if the committee are in agreement with that approach and the suggested timescales for those items to come back to committee, then those elements where they have a date on the Appendix 1 will move back to the forward work programme, so they are delivered in accordance with the committee's work programme. Chair, I'll just take questions.
Councillor Paul Johnson.
But I did feel I was reading parts of that Erskine May had been photocopied and slotted into some of these comments. However, I do think that what Steve Gibbons produced is a very thorough document. I've been through it very carefully. I do think the points he makes and the scheduling and whether things are in context, or what's the phrase, whether within scope, whatever, it makes a lot of sense. We can probably sit here all evening just going through every single one saying yes, no, yes, no. I think the basic drift is basically correct. I think to suddenly start taking bits and pieces and adding them here and adding them there would take away from the overall direction of the constitutional working groups. So I'd be just therefore like to very, very simply to move the recommendations.
Councillor Coppell, seconded. Thank you, Councillor Coppell, you've seconded it. Do we have any speakers on the matter? No. So can we go to the vote? There are two recommendations: that the committee considers the suggested items for inclusion on the committee forward work programme and agrees to the scheduling proposed in Appendix 1. And the second recommendation, that the committee notes the actions proposed for the remaining suggestions in Appendix 1. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? No. Any abstentions? No, that's carried. So we move on to item 9. Review of Constitution, ensuring democracy functions effectively. Sorry?
No, there is a 9.
I accept your apology, Captain Johnson. Councillor Johnson. Right, item 9. Review of Constitution, ensuring democracy functions effectively, to receive a verbal report on progress by the working groups in relation to the review of the Council's Constitution. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. And just for clarity for members, this will be the only time I do a verbal update on this. It will be a written report next time, but because of the sort of scheduling where we're at with the groups, it's just that they've just started going, so there wasn't enough, if you like, information or detail to put in a report. So that's why it's a verbal update today for you. So apologies for that. But as committee are aware, there are 3 working groups formed to look at the work streams that were identified from the feedback from members and officers early this year, end of last year. Each working group has now met to consider start to consider some of those elements and items. I think it's quite interesting to note that those sessions have generated some interesting debate and ideas, and they will ultimately come back to this committee for consideration in due course. The committee will be asked to consider those as a full committee, and we've set some, and each working group will have had the terms of reference, but the proposals for the committee to assess the proposals, the recommendations come back to this committee, is that are they lawful? Do they conflict with other processes within the council that it uses? Are they necessary? Are they workable? Are they clear and unambiguous? Do they promote openness and transparency without harming the interests of council? And are they open to abuse? So the committee will be asked to carefully consider each of the proposals that come forward before they do move any further in the process. It's key now that we keep that momentum going and that we do make that work, pick that pace up for the work of the groups. And it's probably time to remind committee as a whole and those observing online that the point of the review is to identify best practice across Wales and even beyond, if that is the case, and consider how we can apply that to Flintshire County Council. We may be the leader of best practice, but there may be other ways out there that things can be done better. That we then propose the changes to the constitution that contribute to the smooth running of council meetings and make effective use of the time that obviously is valuable for members and officers, but do not bring the council into disrepute. ultimately acts as a critical friend to shape the process contained within the Constitution to make them easy to understand and ensure they're fit for purpose. And obviously the members of the public who may not be familiar with democracy and how it works are able to pick that up and understand what goes on. And also remember that what we do today and over the next several months is there for, not for eternity necessarily, but it is there for a period of time where the administration and membership of council will likely change in the future. So it's got to be workable on the long term as well. And then just remind committee that the next meeting, working group meetings are in 2 weeks' time. The week commencing the 17th of November. Working group 1 on the 19th of November, and then working groups 2 and 3 on the 21st of November. And the details of those will be sent out towards the end of this week for the agenda. All members are entitled to come and observe those sessions, and we will make sure that that does happen as it didn't do as effectively this last time when they first met. So just a very quick update, Chair, for where we are with them. And next time I report back to committee, there will be a more comprehensive and detailed summary report of what's gone on at each one, because the way we're running them at the moment is that at the meeting, well, one meeting and suggestions that put forward are debated quite thoroughly and quite detailed by the members of that group. They then come up with a one, at most two proposed to consider. We review those at the next meeting. So that second process hasn't happened yet. So we just need to make sure that we get to that point before we report back to committee any firmer proposals that are likely to come forward. But happy to take any questions or
yes, some of the items that are discussed actually run over to the next meeting, etc. So there's nothing actually has been decided. It's still, there's a lot of things that have been discussed and are still in abeyance and moving forward. Do we have any questions? Oh, we have Councillor Ibbotson.
Thank you. When the committee decided to embark on this work, it set out a number of ways in which the process should be conducted. First of all, when was Working Group 3's meeting held? Because that wasn't advertised to members generally. There's also meant to be an opportunity for political groups that aren't represented on working groups to send somebody, and I'm not aware of political groups that aren't represented on working groups other than Working Group 2, which was advertised to all members being invited to attend. And the deliberations of those working groups are to be made public. So do we have an indication on when that will be made?
Yes, Chair. The Working Group 3 met before Working Group 1 and 2, ironically. So I will get the date in a second for you, Councillor Ibbotson, but it has met before the before 1 and 2, because there was meetings set up earlier in the process, but due to attendance, 2 of those were postponed or delayed, and then so that's why 3 came before 1 and 2. That was on the 30th of September. Thank you, Chair, for finding that one. In terms of invites, and I will look back as to why that wasn't done effectively, but we will make sure that happens moving forward, Councillor Ibbotson, to reassure you. The meetings were recorded, so for the committee to refer back to, and also for us to publish, we're just looking at how we can set that up in an area of the website where it would sit naturally, and then future ones will be made available publicly as well at the same time. So the first sort of iteration were work in progress. Moving forward, we will get it right next time round. Apologies that it weren't done the first time, Chair and Councillors.
Thank you for that, Steve. Are there any other questions?
Nothing to do.
So would someone like to? There's nothing to move.
No.
No.
There's no.
There's nothing to move. It was just for information. So we'll move on to item 10. Democracy and Boundary Commission Cymru draft annual report 26-27. to receive the draft annual report for 26-27.
I'll take this again, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
So, thank you, Chair. Members will have received the report, but also note that local outlets, news outlets, have picked up some of the, in their view, headlines. But I will focus on the content of the report for members here. Members will note that we are now referring to the Democratic and Boundary Commission Cymru, the DBCC, not the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales, IRPW, because their functions were transferred to the DBCC at the 1st of April this year. They have effectively the same remit as what the IRPW had, which is to look at the remuneration and how councillors are paid for, or allowances given to members for their duties in the public sector. What would normally happen under the IRPW, they would normally issue a questionnaire for members to feed back on. The DBCC, and I apologise for the acronym so frequently, they haven't done that this year. So what I've tried to do in the report in paragraph 114 is to draw the committee's attention to some of the themes that they are trying to, or they put through in their report, because there is some slight differences how they reported this year to how the IRPW, and some quite significant proposals that they are looking to consider. Probably the most telling one is the potential for resettlement payments for those individual councillors who stand for re-election but do not get re-elected. So in the same way that members of Parliament receive a resettlement payment after they've not been elected, the same principle is proposed to be looked at for county councillors. What they've also said is that they will look at the framework and methodology that's applied to the remuneration for the sector once every elected term, so once every 5 years. And they also have committed to look at whether the benchmark of the annual survey of hours earnings that the IRPW used on a regular basis is still their preferred choice. So those are the three key areas that have been tasked to look at by the Welsh Government. What they have done this time round is, again, they've made recommendations for the basic members' salary to be increased in line with their recommendation from £19,771 per year to £21,044. They do align that to the average earnings of the Welsh workers, so that's what they tried to do over the time prior with the IRPW. What they have noted is that it's based on a 3-day working week. They assume that councillors work a 3-day week. We all know that that's not necessarily the case, but that's what they've based theirs on. They've also confirmed the special responsibility allowances which are paid to senior salaries for chairs and executive positions are based on full-time equivalents. What they've also noted in the report is that they're committed to reviewing whether the basis for the senior salaries is correct to be 5 days a week, but made no reference to the work of a councillor being 3 days or indifferent to 3 days. So members may wish to consider that. They've also committed to look at the co-opted member rates. They haven't been reviewed or changed for several years now. What they've said they're waiting for is the Welsh Government's review of the public board rates before they can do any alterations to those. A key thing to highlight as well, and I do this every time I do this report, that you're not voting, members of councils do not vote to increase their pay. It's set by an independent body, so you have no say in what they are proposing. And I think that's key to reinforce that. Obviously, members are at their own free will can choose to accept or not. And I've bolded that in paragraph 111 that it's an individual choice, and I think that's key, that it's individual choice as to what members do or not in terms of that. They have not changed any of the determinations that stand us alongside the main headline ones of the rates of compensation for members. So, but they have committed to look at those over the term ahead of the next report. So they will look at some of the things. So I think they're like listed in paragraph 1.12. And if I can draw members' attention to particularly to paragraph 114, the 5 themes, maybe I should follow. There's 5 areas that I think as a committee you may want to consider in terms of feeding back to the commission, and that is, do you have any views or opinions on the resettlement or proposal to look at resettlement payments? That's not a given. It's they're going to look at that on behalf of Welsh Government and then make their recommendations. Welsh Government would need to make some legislative changes to bring that into play. Also, whether you think their approach to reviewing how senior salaries or senior roles are recompensed is a fair thing to look at. Whether the ASH survey is the right or not survey to use in terms of setting levels of remuneration. Their approach to the corporate joint committees, and so I did skip over that. That's listed in paragraph 110, where at the moment there is no sort of remuneration for CJCs, but they are considering whether that does need to change in the future. So again, whether the committee has a view on that, and whether there's any comments on the previous year's determinations, which are listed in paragraph 114 and available in more detail in the report from the DBCC which is on page 91 of the pack for members. So happy to take any comments, questions, or views on those 5 areas, Chair.
Councillor Parkhurst.
Yeah, Jock and Val, Chair. I've just got 2 comments I'd like to make. Firstly is I just wonder whether the DBCC, whatever they're called, are out of touch with reality. But in proposing a 6.4% increase for councillors, may well link in with average earnings in Wales for the relevant numbers of days per week. But at a time when local authorities are facing almost bankruptcy in some cases, that doesn't sit comfortably. And I think that any increase above inflation is very hard to justify. I'd also be against the parachute payments or the resettlement payments for councillors, some of whom may well be at the end of their sort of useful time, if that's the right expression. And having parachute payments will only encourage people to stand just to seek a payment when they don't get elected. I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think we should be resisting that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Parkhurst. Just the resettlement payments were only for if they stand for re-election, so one assumes they've already done 5 years prior to that, just to clarify that. Are there any other comments? No? Councillor Bibby.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think somewhat along the same lines of what has been said by Councillor Parkhurst. I think in terms of resettlement payments, well, let's just put the reality of how it operates out there in the real world with our residents. Ultimately, if you lose an election, the voters have sacked you. Now, I don't think there's any sort of industry out there where they give you a payment for getting the sack. So if you lose an election, I think tough. You've lost the confidence of the people who have voted. So I don't think you should get a payment for it. I think, again, and then I think Councillor Parkhurst made a very interesting comment. We've got many cases of the previous Senedd election and the previous general election where individuals across the country stood, in many cases, either through defecting from what they were originally elected for, or whether they'd been involved in some form of misconduct where they've stood simply to get the payment, to lose the election to get the payment. As far as I'm concerned, I think resettlement payments are a no-no. I think in terms of the basis of setting remuneration levels, I think Councillor Parkhurst has said it's spot on. That may be evidence that is sort of said in the general economy, but we're dealing with the context of local government that's under severe pressure. And I think personally, any increase in our allowances should be tied to the NJC, to the Green Book, I think if there is an increase in our allowances, it should be tied to the same increases that the people who collect our bins, the people who are our cleaners, the carers, the clerical staff, you know, the people that work in this local authority. I think that's the most sensible approach, that it should be tied to that. In terms of corporate joint committees and then references to outside bodies, well, I think appointment to outside bodies is part and parcel of the roles of a lot of members. I think there already is provision to assist for, you know, mileage claims to attend meetings outside the county. I don't think there should be any further payments made to members. I think that's part of your duties to attend those outside bodies. You know, so I think personally, no to resettlement payments. I don't think they're appropriate. I think that setting remuneration levels, I think any increases should be tied to the NJC and the settlements that are made to all council employees. And I think in terms of attending corporate joint committees or any other outside bodies, I don't see why it is appropriate to receive any payments other than, you know, a member making expenses claim for any travel that they've had to incur. So, yeah, I think, you know, I think in terms of determinations from previous years, I think, you know, as Councillor Parker said, I think it needs to be tied to the context of the situation we're in, and that's where our finances are under a lot of pressure. There's figures mentioned here about £100,000 cost pressure. Well, you know, I think in the current circumstances, I don't think that's appropriate.
Thank you for that. Totally agree. Councillor Johnson.
I maybe have noticed, I've been through the report a couple of times. In previous reports, it has been that members who are on cabinet, etc., senior roles do not get payments from town and community councils. I can't see it in this report, but I do think it's an important thing to have in these reports. That should be that we should accept that as a principle, a basic principle, that if you're a cabinet member, etc., on a principal authority, you do not get your costs, etc., from a town or community council.
Does serve on town and community councils where there is obviously this payment, I believe £156 and an additional payment for consumables. I think in that case where members of town and community councils serve as county councillors, you know, they're already being remunerated, and I think, you know, I think that payment there is people who serve on town and community councils to cover some of their costs. Again, I don't think county councillors that serve on the town and community council should be eligible for their payments as they're already receiving. And again, I think being a member of a town and community council, again, is a part and parcel of being a county councillor. I know for a fact, and this is an example of what we do in Shotton, all members in Shotton, and I know with Councillor Gillian Brockley is also online. You know, we donate our you know, that payment that is set aside, you know, by the town council, we donate that into supporting voluntary groups and, you know, obviously the option there. But I don't think county councillors should be receiving any payment from town and community councils when they're already being remunerated. And I think being a member of a town and community council is part and parcel of the job.
Just need an answer.
Chair, there's two elements to that do need an answer.
Okay.
Councillor Johnson mentioned about payments for senior officers, senior members on the county council receiving payments. They can't. That is one of the previous. So it's in there. So it does say that in there. I think in terms of Councillor Bibby's point, I think what you've got to bear in mind is there's two separate roles. There's a role of the community and town councillor and also the county councillor. So whilst the DVCC can mandate that those in sort of receipt of a senior post or salary cannot receive the equivalent at the community town council level, the point of the allowances for community town councils to allow them to fulfil their roles on a wider scale. So it's and then again, that's a choice for members. I think we shouldn't cloud or cross over the two. They're very separate bodies, separate entities. So although we can feed that back, I don't know if that would be mandated by them, Chair. So, but yes, certainly the extra the payments are referenced in the long determination alongside, and I think it's a fair point that Councillor Beaver made. But I think it's important that there's that distinction between the two bodies, that a community town council is a different legal entity to a county council, and therefore that's why there's different determinations. Some of those are mandated on community and town councils, that they have to pay that allowance to them. So, yeah.
Councillor Coppell.
Thanks, Chair. Just obviously, we're here to comment on this document, and not necessarily to accept it, as I understand correct. So, but obviously around the table, there's a very strong feeling that 6.4% is a very wrong figure. And it would be really, I think it's incumbent on this group to make sure that's heavily advertised, such that the strength of feeling around this table is almost unique, in as much that really a number more associated with inflation is the better number to use, given the fact that nobody else is going to benefit apart from us, and that's a wrong position to be in.
I think we're all of the same disposition, so we can carry on talking, but we're well into the second hour. So I'm just going to go through the recommendations. I'm just going to go. Are you just going to agree with everybody else?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree with everything you've said, and it's absolutely right. I think we've also got to be reminded, though, that the reason, I think, for the members of the council, what the Welsh Government were trying to do, as all governments, is trying to provide a salary which was commensurate so that younger people could be attracted to take those roles. So, although we're saying it should be the same as the NJC or the Green Book, I would say that the member of the council, that maybe should be left, because the sentiment of that is to attract people, younger people, into those roles. But all the other roles, I believe that it should be left, as you said, through the NJC and Green Book levels, so that, you know, we know the sentiment, we know what they're trying to do. I get that, and that's fine. I think that's laudable. But if we start doing it, as we're saying here, on all members, then you might lose that kind of benefit for younger people to become members of the council. I think it's quite right that they should be able to become younger members of the council. We should attract that. By doing this, we might not attract that type of person. It's just a point.
Right, with no other members wishing to speak, I'll just highlight the recommendations again. The committee considers and comments on the determinations made by the Democracy and Boundary Commission Cymru in their draft annual report 2026-27, using the 5 areas identified in paragraph 1.14, resettlement payments, salaries for senior roles, basis for setting remuneration levels, corporate joint committees, and determination from previous years. And the second one, that the Democratic Services Manager be authorised to make a response on behalf of the committee to the Democracy and Boundary Commission Cymru, reflecting the feedback provided at the meeting. So obviously, Steve's taken into account all your comments. Can I have someone to propose those? Councillor Coppell, seconder. Sorry? I think we've got a sufficient number on screen. So do we have a seconder for that? Okay. Robertson, could you put your screen on, please?
If he's voting.
No, he's gone. Right. Could we have a seconder, please? Councillor Parkhurst. All those in favour of those 2 recommendations? Thank you. Any against the recommendations? No. Any abstentions? No. Thank you very much. That one's passed. And that's the last item on the agenda. Thank you very much for your indulgence. This committee is closed.